Hello, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to New York City's premier design event and growing presence on the design world stage. The 2024 NYC by Design Festival is in its 12th year with more than 200 events, tours, talks, and exhibitions around town. I'm Eileen Shaw. I'm Executive Director of NYC by Design. Now, day 2, you are in for a design-packed week of inspiration, provocation, education, and celebration. When we first conceived of our Keynote series, our goal was to put prestigious designers in conversation to discuss world issues and challenge them to consider how design can influence, change, or solve these challenges. And we have serious issues, our world today. Not surprising, it was the technology companies that stepped up first to share their innovation, thoughts, and insights. Our world and our industry, the design industry, is powered by technology. And for those who don't understand it, it can be intimidating and frightening, and it's changing so quickly. And this is why we have our keynotes to help guide us through the tools of our new world. And IBM has been doing this for more than 100 years, and through design for more than 60 years. IBM's story has been deeply linked to major milestones in American and New York history. Its longevity and success through many transitional periods is greatly attributed to their deep belief that good design is good business, and it still is today. We're joined by Todd Simmons, VP of Brand Experience and Design and co-lead of IBM Blue Studio. Todd brings nearly 30 years of multidisciplinary experience to IBM and has the distinction of being the very first designer in the company's long history to be brought on as an executive VP. And Terry Yu, Vice President of Brand and Content Strategy, leads a multidisciplinary team of brand, messaging, and content strategists responsible for translating IBM's business and marketing strategy into messages, brands, and content that are powerfully relevant and compelling. So without further ado, I hand the mic over to Terry and Todd, and let's begin. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us, and thanks for coming to hear our talk. I'm Terry Yu, and we thought we would start this talk by talking a little bit about who IBM is. We didn't want to assume that you knew. We are a 113-year-old technology company, which sounds crazy, I know. We were founded in 1911. We have 280,000 employees. We operate in over 170 countries around the world. We're a B2B company, so we work with large businesses and institutions. And the areas of focus for our business are enterprise software with a big focus on generative AI, hybrid cloud technology to help companies manage multiple clouds and computing environments. We also have a really extensive consulting business consulting, technology management. We also have design and experience design as part of that. And finally, we have one of the largest private research institutions in the world. And I think it's the primary reason why we have had such longevity. We're constantly moving to the future. And it's one of the reasons why we are considered one of the leaders in quantum computing, which is an emerging space. But our talk today is about unity, not uniformity, and it is inspired by this man. How many of you know who this man is? Can anyone identify? This is Elliot Noyes. He was a Renaissance man of design. He was an industrial designer. He was also an architect. He was a curator here at MoMA, actually. I think he was the first curator of industrial design at MoMA in the 1940s. And he was hired by the second CEO of IBM, Thomas Watson Jr., to lead and establish our first corporate design program. And it was his philosophy, unity, not uniformity, that inspires us today.
Sure. So most people, when they think of IBM and the word design, they think Paul Rand right away. Like I ask that question deliberately over and over when I do talks. But I guarantee you this guy had more of an effect on the whole company than Paul Rand did. But we'll get to that. This is a memo that went out to all the senior executives at the time in 1959, so 3 years into the design program. And I like to refer to this because back then, design meant everything. We didn't use like clever slogans like experiential marketing or original content back then. We didn't even use the word brand. We didn't even use the word marketing. By architecture, interiors, displays, products, packaging, and printed material, they meant literally everything. And those were additional to the blue suits that they wore at the time, the songs the company had going way back before the 50s. But they really just meant everything by design. And I show this because it really reflects how we're working today. So unity, not uniformity, came from Elliot Noyes. It was a kind of philosophy, and you'll see how it comes to life as we go through this. But he also said a corporation is to be like a painting. Everything visible should contribute to the correct total statement. And some of the things that I personally, and I'll speak personally, but I try to manifest this every day, take from Elliot Noyes is a few things. Number one, he was a practitioner. He was an actual architect and industrial designer, as you're about to find out. He wasn't a fan of design. He wasn't a cheerleader for design. He wasn't a people manager. He made stuff. And one of the things about me that I've always believed is if you're not making anything, you're not making anything happen. And so he's one of the best examples I've ever seen, and you can't work at IBM without kind of dealing with the design history at IBM, but where he was a real practitioner leader. But he was also that curator here at MoMA, actually. And what he did was also assemble the best of the best around a table whose hands could touch IBM in a very, very curatorial fashion. He didn't do it all himself. And none of these folks, Charles and Ray Eames, Saarinen, keep going, ever worked for IBM. So what they were doing instead is while they were all consultants, trying to craft what we call like corporate character and to try to get that imbued into all the things that they did. One of the most magnificent things that Elliot Noyes designed was the Selectric typewriter, which is a beautiful, probably sits in the permanent collection of this building. I'm sure it does, in fact. But the invention of the rollerball, or it's been called many names, the golf ball, keep going, was the first time you could ever introduce adjustable type into a typewriter. Certainly, everything you write could have an inflection. Elliot Noyes, we didn't design this, but commissioned Courier to be made as one of the typefaces available. That became the industry standard for script writing for Hollywood, because it was monospaced and time-based. All of these themes, you'll see, are cyclical in our presentation. Another major movement was around System 360 and all the iterations of that. And you're seeing his work here. And he brought a lot of play. And he didn't just design the typewriter. He designed the desk the typewriter was going to be on, what a secretary bank might look like. And a good example of that is there's an entire episode of Mad Men based on the installation of System 360 into the ad agency, which is really fun. They're afraid of it, just like AI today. That's pretty much the premise of the episode. The other thing he would do, and this is more important than any other stylistic points you could take from mid-century design, was he developed this white room, and this will come back as well. And so floor, ceiling, walls, whatever, he would build these prototypes and put them in this white room, and then almost handhold executives to bring them through presenting where design and development was going. And this lasted for decades. And the other thing about him that I really appreciate and try to do every day is prototype. So these are pre-PC prototypes, but if you go into our archives, he had this meticulous 1:12 ratio that he would build, these miniature little prototypes. They all sit in Poughkeepsie now. And they're just amazing. And you'll find a tablet before there was a tablet. You'll find an MP3 player before there was an MP3 player or an iPod. So I really appreciate not just the things he made, but the way in which he worked. And it wasn't just products. Like the memo said, it was the places. So Mies van der Rohe, Brouwer, Saarinen, all of these folks would get involved in creating these places where IBMers would go to work. This is a photo of our research headquarters. We're all over the world, but this one's in Yorktown Heights in upstate New York, Westchester, which is still the center of gravity for innovation for IBM. And you might notice it looks a little like Apple Park, but decades before.
Designing a corporate design program, how would you do it in an ideal sense? You would probably draw a diagram somewhat like what you see on your left side, right? You would expect a lot of command and control. It would be very centralized. You would oversee everything. The reality is you're actually working in an environment that's more like on your right. You don't have a lot of control. There's lots of little silos, teams everywhere. And so that's the environment that Todd and I work in every day. And so how do you create a culture and an environment for great design when you're working in an environment like that? And so that's one of the main reasons, or one of the main things that we think about is systems building. I think Stephen Heller once wrote about Paul Rand at IBM, was that he said changing the design mindset in the company is largely an educational problem. And so that's why we focus so much on systems building and on educating all the people and making it easy to do great design.
Exactly. So we're going to unpack this expression, good design is good business, in a few different dimensions and kind of go a little bit deeper. So good design is building bonds. One of the things we realized a couple years after I joined in December of 2014, so it's coming up on 10 years, and we started deliberately being a small team working on special projects. We never operated off a brief. We kind of floated towards where we saw business needs, and we made projects out of problems we saw. And we had been doing that for like a couple of years almost, and we've been doing it blind. Like it was kind of just this gut feeling of like what was IBM or not about what we were doing. And we realized that nowhere is it written down like what makes something IBM. Not from a design perspective, not from a brand perspective. It was something you felt in a weird way. And all these guys back in the day felt it, right? And they were doing it, but nobody wrote it down. We looked. We tried to find it. And we found this quote: without aesthetic, design is either the humdrum repetition of familiar cliches or a wild scramble for novelty. Without aesthetic, the computer is a mindless speed machine, producing effects without substance, form without relevant content, or content without meaningful form. That was happening at IBM. It was like, but it was said probably in the 70s. And we were like, that's what we're missing. And we don't mean shapes and colors by aesthetic. We mean the fundamental belief in the role of design underneath it. And we started noticing these patterns in our work. That IBM, going all the way back to manufacturing meat slicers, has always been clocks, punch cards, keep going, has always been this medium between mankind and machine. and it's still true today, of AI or quantum computing. It's about enhancing professional performance and commerce. Individual units of measurable meat is the same as AI. It's an assistant to getting things done and progressing things. So with that, we decided since it didn't exist, we'd try to write it. This was an arduous process. How do you write it down on paper, literally? What our point of view is on design, what our philosophy is, what are the principles we're going to measure ourselves by, and how do you do it so that you write it in a way that is true to describing anything IBM had ever made and anything that IBM ever will. And that was a real challenge at the time. But we took it all the way to the CEO. We asked for his blessing to, A, do you agree with the philosophy? And B, will you help us kind of get it implemented and hold everyone to it? The other thing about design systems, though, is Terry, like for 30 years, we had a Paul Rand brand standards guideline.
Yeah, I mean, we started this work in 2015. We had still been working off of brand guidelines that were developed, last updated in the 1980s by Paul Rand. And so it was overdue for us to do a major update. It hadn't even taken into consideration digital or anything like that.
No. But in so doing, the whole point was systems design is like all about redistributing creativity. That's the way I see it. So you cannot have creativity or get credit for creativity if you don't have consistency. But creativity is not the enemy of consistency. So you have to kind of almost build the system that lays the drum and bass of the song so you can add lyrics and guitar riffs and stuff like that on top of it. We were not concerned about IBM becoming a monolith. That would be the worst thing that we could do. So if it was all about being brand police and putting the logo in the left corner, that's not a modern brand. One of the things we started with was a corporate typeface for the first time. IBM never had one, was paying $1 million a year for Helvetica in licensing fees for decades. So this actually started as a smaller project and became like this enormous project. But Plex is our corporate typeface now. We just finished it this week. It's taken 7 years to completely kit out, which I'll get into. But we were thinking, what is one thing we would do? And we're a loquacious company, highly communicative. Text is how we work. And so if we could do one design move that would change everything, it would be a typeface. Suddenly our digital experience changes. Every piece of software changes on a day. And so that's what we did. And it's a peculiar thing. And in the process, we could give a whole keynote on this. The investigation and the engineering and the performance that we were trying to drive with it and the real estate we wanted it to take up less of and the environmentalism into it. I mean, it's its own thing. But now it's got this character, and the discovery in how to build character into this typeface has led to many, many more things about our point of view on design. Today, it comes in 4 families and 8 weights each. It supports over 120 languages. We just finished Chinese, and we added math, which is a language none of us speak. And I don't even know how to use, and that was delivered this week. Last week, we also decided to make it open source. We gave it away. We did not try to keep the IP of it. Something this useful and expressive belongs. And it also allows us to we're a giant organization. It meant we could automatically have it on machines as a system font, just like Courier earlier. So just last week, almost 600 million calls for IBM Plex on Google fonts last week. And right now, there are almost 800,000 websites that currently use it. Those are mom and pops. It also includes Paul Rand's website. So it gave us this kind of character. You've got to put character into the characters of every glyph of 50,000 of them for Chinese. But it's this mixture of expressive and productive. And with that, we took everything we elementally make something with and injected our philosophy and principles. And we issued a ton of guidance. And you can go online and see all of this. It's all open source. Our whole design language is live and changing and evolving all the time. But we made sure that for every little micro app icon, there was an injected, instant identifiable IBM-ness to it. And it goes on and on and on. And then it goes beyond, again, beyond sort of branding and communications and product. The biggest thing we were trying to affect is our software, actually. So for a brand team sitting in corporate, sitting in marketing, we weren't very liked at first or accepted, but eventually that design language made it into code, made it into components, and started making it into our products. And then our physical environments as well. So you're seeing here an example of the IDL language making it into products, making all of our products, as insisted on by our chairman, better and more unified, and passing the thumb test. You can kind of see that IBM-ness that I'm describing.
Yeah, and it's added to all the time. I mean, we do it almost internally in almost an open source way to add additional components and designs to it. This has also improved the way we communicate and promote our products. Did you want to talk about this?
Again, redistribution of creativity. Like when you can get something done that is good faster, what else could you do? How could that product be a little bit better? Or what new imaginative idea do you have? So the business value of creating these systems was there too. Sorry, Terry.
Oh, no. And so it made product promotion or marketing a lot easier, so that you see the relationship between the product design and then the design that we use to communicate about the product. And these are just a few examples. And the other major area where we've made major improvements is in our workspace and environmental design. Before we created the system, every workspace was designed a little differently. Many beautiful workspaces, but there was no consistent standard, and there was no standard IBM-ness about it. And so we did a major effort to create lighting standards, even space configuration standards as well. And we'll play you this video so you can see what it's like.
An IBM workplace lays the foundation for community and collaboration. It reflects our values and honors our legacy. We come together at the intersection of science and society, mankind and machine. This dynamic is the basis of design at IBM. Organic and engineered, technology and expertise, local and global. It's space to find our rhythm, to discover patterns in data, and turn research into insight. We amplify diverse voices and encourage new perspectives in an inclusive culture of co-creation. Flexible systems and geometric design create hybrid spaces to meet our need for concentration and collaboration. It's space to connect, to think, to define and engage in a shared experience in our pursuit of progress.
We had to spend a long time building relationships with our real estate team to even talk them into thinking that this was a good idea to do, leaning into efficiency and cost effectiveness. And it took us a few years to get them to do it. But now that we're building out new spaces, we're actually moving into a new office space in Manhattan at 1 Madison Avenue. And now we're able to do this work from scratch, from the ground up, and it's super exciting to be able to design a space from the studs up. We also think about design in the context of our communications. We're really inspired, again, by our past. This is a commission from Charles and Ray Eames to create an activation to help teach the general public about basic concepts of math. It actually still exists today. If you go to the Boston Science Center, you can experience Mathematica, and it's really wonderful and delightful. And we aspire to do the same kinds of things today in our activations and experiences. Think as a word is really important to us. It's our corporate motto. It's been around since the very beginning. And it also happens to be in today, our brand for our client event experiences. We're actually hosting Think next week in Boston. And as a brand, we're working on for thought leadership as well. And so that's a new thing that we're working on right now.
Yeah, Think actually exists longer than the name IBM as kind of this motto. And then I guess it was 2017 or 18, we decided to make it a bit of a brand. So events, education, editorial. So think of it as like our T magazine to the New York Times. That's what Think is. And we reinvent it every year. Now, I'm going to just tell one story of 1 year because we're constantly like reinterpreting and representing it since we started. This was just before COVID, but we were sitting at a Think event listening to Imogen Heap present, who's a technophile herself and uses her body and voice as an instrument. Like, it's incredible. Big fan of IBM's. Who knew? And we were like, what if for the next year we started with her and had her create a score, and then we would visualize the score after the fact based on the stems of the song, and this was the result. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but you get the whole process of just like getting in there and trying to invent something really new and then visualizing it on the right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, COVID hit and she couldn't perform the branding live, but that was the goal. But it still manifested. And all of the sounds of the video actually come from her walking around at our research center in Yorktown Heights, recording literally the sounds of like quantum refrigerators and stuff like that. So lots of fun. The other thing that happens at the Think event that Terry mentioned, we'll kick this off in Boston next week, and there's a lot of keynotes and things just like this, but also this big forum floor that just think of it as an arcade for technology, just like Mathematica. And then Think goes on tour. It's sort of like Taylor Swift, And so this is an example of some of the work we do in the studio now. This is what we call an activation. It's experiential. It tells the story of a client in Australia who runs a commercial rail system, and it combines two pieces of software we make. And it allows them to predict future problems and attack them before they occur and things like that. And then we take these big physical exhibits and then we turn them into digital experiences that live online or go in sales decks and things like that for our sales force. People don't really realize how many things IBM makes that you use. Your Citibank app on your Apple Watch was designed by IBM. You just didn't know it. We have a huge digital experience portion of the consulting business. And one of the partnerships we've had for years is with the Masters. This was last month. And we've been working with the Masters, I think, for about 30 years. And we are the entire tech provider for that. We do the cybersecurity. We handle the cloud management. We're dealing with all the data. We're adding AI commentary now in Spanish. We can track every shot, every hole, and we can go back and do that for years. But as part of that partnership, we actually have a physical presence at Augusta National. And this is like a 20-foot digital screen. It's staffed with IBMers running the whole show. And it allows us to take executives and potential clients through almost an end-to-end story of what IBM can do for any business. Only this is in the context of golf. And so what you're seeing here is some examples of how we brought that experience to life.
Well, the cool thing about this is these are actual shots of pro golfers over time who played the Masters. And so you could actually go there if you were a golfer and pull up yours, and you could see all the shots you ever made during the championship. So it's really, really cool experience.
And we can make predictions about the likelihood of making birdies on certain holes and stuff like that. So if you're a fan of golf, this is the Ferrari. What is next?
Oh, we also have, we work with a lot of other technology companies. We work with Adobe. We actually ran a mini campaign. We're doing a partnership on generative AI. We're helping them do it in a safe and governed way. And we did this for Adobe Summit. So I don't know if you can play the video.
We're doing a lot with AI, obviously, IBM. We've been in the AI business for 30 years. And interestingly here, because we'll probably get the question, we used AI to do this as well. We see it as many of you, I think, do too, as an input. It's a tool. It's not the finished product. But we're also like big Adobe users, so given our population. So that's a piece we did around what can go wrong with generative AI in the creative process.
We're also experimenting with different kinds of content franchises, and this was a series that we've been doing about different use cases for applying AI to transform how you do them, and they're kind of led by an interview with a subject matter expert. Rather than do another video with a talking head, we decided to illustrate it in a way to really bring the concepts to life, and we can play that for you.
Right now in the customer self-service space, the biggest problems consumers are facing as they interact with brands is a very disparate digital experience. They've got all these doors that they can go through to try and find the right answer. You really want to present them with a single door that is always going to get them to the right outcome. If you have a virtual assistant powered by generative AI, it can act as a beautiful router between all your existing investments. Fundamentally, generative AI is going to be able to give a much more succinct answer, much more applicable, much more personalized for that specific customer when they ask a question. Over the next few years, as the AI gets more powerful, I think brands will get more comfortable handing that control over to basically build the entirety of the conversation and the interaction with the consumer. AI is getting so intelligent. If you're not applying that intelligence in the customer service space, you're going to fall behind.
The other nice thing about this way of doing it is that we could easily translate it and change the voiceover. So we translated this into multiple languages as well and was able to use the same art.
Okay, good design is doing good. So IBM's, we could do a whole talk on this too, is a pioneer in social responsibility. Going back way before there were laws and doing things differently and doing things better as a whole company. One of the projects I'm very, very proud of is Be Equal, which is a program that we also open source. You can download this brand and use it yourself. It's built more like an Obama campaign than a brand, because equality matters beyond our own concerns around it. But it actually started as during the Me Too movement and was focused on women's executive compensation. That's how it started. But within IBM, we have all of these BRGs, or groups and communities inside the company. So we sort of kicked the tires on it and started to make it represent everyone. And we took allyship from the LGBT plus community and actually made our own new allyship program that meant that you had to represent more than one community. So fully embracing diversity and inclusion. So you can check that out at beequal.com. That's one. And we put it into practice too. Like from a pure design standpoint, there is an entire team focused on accessibility, and man, they will come after you. They will. So accessibility is just one example, and we've created products. We make those products available to the public. They are free. They are open source. Any company can use them because that's how much it matters. Okay, last section.
So we always live and think about the future. This is a quantum chandelier. It's an incredible piece of technology. This is one of ours. We're one of the companies that's focused on developing this technology. And if you go to IBM Research, it looks like an experiment. You know, wires hanging everywhere. And we wanted to start thinking about how we would turn it into something that was more commercial. And so we commissioned a piece of work to turn this into an actual piece of hardware that we could install and sell, which led us to this.
Yeah, so this is IBM Quantum System 1. And we might have one of the partners that helped us make this. But it was a unique project for us, too, because we had no business doing industrial design as a brand team. But we knew who was really good at doing industrial design as a brand team. And we brought them to bear, and the research folks allowed us to do this because no one had even thought about what the packaging of a quantum computer would be. And so we worked with our teams and collaborated to kind of create this System 1, what a data center filled with these would look like. And this is about a 12-foot by 12-foot object, by the way. It's giant. And at the core of it is the coldest place in the universe.
It's colder than outer space in there,
yes,
in order for it to be stable. Yeah.
And so what you don't see is the back end of this, which was every bit of it. The wiring, everything was designed. We'll skip that because we just came out with Quantum System 2. Learning from the first, and you're seeing some images here from our Think Lab in Yorktown Heights, upstate. What I love about it is it's, wow, like there's the white room again, there's System 360 again, and here we are with quantum. Like this minute. That's how new this is. But we'll give you a little bit of a better look at it here.
Why don't you tell us what you're working on? Computing is bits plus neurons plus qubits.
We're in a really exciting time for quantum where we're having co-development of applications, theory, and hardware.
We have new fridges now that have a modular configuration.
Right now we're a touch below 20 millikelvin.
We get to create an AI architecture from scratch.
In AI, we need different perspectives represented. Open source is the way to go.
All levels of our technology stack are here.
Not only will these technologies continue to mature and provide value on their own, but in the next 5 years, we'll see meaningful intersection points between these technologies.
Every year something happens that I would not have believed possible.
What's next?
What's next?
What's next? What's next?
What's next in computing is
democratized open technology.
Quantum coherently coupled processors.
Seamless computing.
What amazes me the most is that we have gone this far, but that we keep going further.
Amazing. It really is to stand in front of one. Lastly, we just wanted to touch on, sometimes there's all the projects, and it's been almost a decade for me, but there's always the project of us. Like, how is any of this possible? And it's not the stuff you win awards for, it's not the stuff that the public really sees, but it's an awful lot of concerted effort around talent and teaming and rituals and things like that that are more organizational inside baseball on how we are creating the conditions to be creative every day when we go to work. And I'm as proud of that stuff as anything else. So we're now the Blue Studio, but when we were just our brand team, we were strategists and creatives, about 40 of us. And what it forced us to become is like a SEAL team. Like we were like going out into the business on missions and building relationships across the entire business, inside and out, and just almost planting seeds all the time and trying to earn trust. Back to the building bonds thing, relationships, building that faith and trust is something I'm as proud of as anything shown here. Now we're the Blue Studio. Our portion of creativity is about 300 people that sit. This is kind of how we're loosely organized, although we're really very T-shaped in how we collaborate. But these are basically the things we do. The other thing we realized, and this was, back to the matrixed environment, the right side versus the left side that Terry mentioned earlier, we've discovered over the years we've gotten really good at knowing who is good and playing matchmaker between our partners and our projects, almost hand-picking them for that. And that's been a pretty interesting thing. So now, with some of the recent changes that the Blue Studio came out of, we now, if you want to work with anyone outside of IBM, outside of the Blue Studio, you have to go through our roster. And we're constantly like pruning it. So it keeps us sharp. We never want to be limiting our ideas to our own capacity or capability, just like Elliott Noyes, always bringing the best to bear. And I would say probably 50% of the work we do in collaboration with partners today, if not more sometimes. And back to Elliott's white room. One thing we also do, which is not every agency likes this actually, but is we do our own version of a white room. We host one of the most horizontal meetings that you can find at IBM. We were doing it in person and monthly for a while. Now we do it quarterly, and it's online because we have teams all over the world. But it is like a horizontal view of what's happening in whatever state it's happening that's important that's going on in the business. And that is just not how companies work. You are on your project, you are in your thing, on your team, and like you have no idea your left hand from the right hand that's going on in the company. So we host these, and it's our version of Elliott Noyes' White Room. So today, design at IBM is about 3,200 designers, however tightly or loosely you define that. And this is kind of how they sit across the business as designers. We also have been elevating, in a company like IBM, you're trying to elevate design to the same as engineering. We're an engineering and sales organization, basically. And in the last 10 to 12 years, we've been able to take the ratio of designer to engineer at IBM from 1 in 60 to 1 in 16. So we end up following, as designers, we end up kind of following an engineering track a lot because that's just how the company thinks. But that's kind of how the population works today. And as we've said a couple times during this presentation, all of this is publicly available and usable by any of you. So check it out. That's it. I have no idea where we are on time. But questions, anyone? Anything?
Raise your hand, I'll give you a mic.
No? Enough said?
I have more of a comment, Todd. You mentioned golf, but there might be some tennis lovers because New York has, so you guys also do the tennis.
We're all over the U.S. Open.
And Wimbledon.
And Wimbledon coming up soon. Wimbledon soon.
And Roland Garros.
Yeah, you will find us there. To me, it's like one of the greatest things in New York is the U.S. Open. Love it.
You guys weigh in on the advertising at all?
Yes.
And how does that work, with the barriers to agencies and things like that?
Well, it's changed a lot over the past 5 years, I think. Because we have so much more in-house capacity, we are more involved up front in the strategy work and also in providing creative direction. I think in the past, it was completely sort of outsourced. It was all, the agency did everything. And so that's really different, I think, going forward. So we're a lot more involved, I think.
It's evolved. Like, we're much more involved than we ever have been. Because if I flash back 9, 10 years ago, advertising is absolutely not the problem at IBM. We had Smarter Planet, and you have all these things kind of going on. And so for a long time, we didn't pay any attention to marketing. Like I said before, we were trying to get IBM to exist in a product and in other ways. So we didn't really pay much attention. Our team wasn't directly involved in it. Nowadays, we are. And whether it's our own participation with, in collaboration with the agency, or we're bringing that partner roster, which isn't all just agencies, it's artists, it's photographers, it's, folks like, we'll bring them to bear to the agency and influence the work that way.
Say that one more time, sir.
How do you test, pilot, and validate designs as new concepts?
How do we test, validate? I think I'm good.
Depends on, yeah. So do we test or validate designs? No, not really. Like, we don't really, we kind of take a Steve Jobs, view on that. Like, we do the hard work to know kind of what we're doing and put our, instincts behind it. We do test things like in the marketing sense. We're testing language and what's landing and what's, we'll track, sort of heat map a digital experience and, web traffic and stuff like that. We're measuring all the time, but that's slightly, and then improving, but that's different than, like, we don't do a lot of testing of our own hypotheses.
I mean, the product teams probably do a ton of testing and stuff, but we're talking about it mostly from a brand perspective, which is we're meditating on who IBM is at its core, and then therefore making decisions on how that gets manifest. And so we don't want to test who we are. We are who we are. We're trying to be the best. We're trying to evoke the best version of who we are. And we're obviously focused on a lot of the fundamentals, right? The core building blocks of what makes our brand, so that then we can turn that into product and communications and digital experiences. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So is that like a group meditation, or is it like how do you like disseminate that? How does the team, like, is there a central group of people that kind of like overlooks that and says this is what we're going to release into the public, or does every employee, every designer know like what that ethos is and they're empowered to kind of make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's baked into our design language and in our brand center. And that's why when you go there, you'll see lots of videos like we played, because we're trying to teach people why. Why do we make these choices? Where does it come from? What's the source? And it's usually coming from these core ideas of who we are and what we care about, what we value. And, that's how we do it.
Don't get me wrong. We see a lot of awful work in the company too, like but less and less and less and less. It's a journey. Like, it's the educational piece.
I told Todd when he joined that I said we have to go for 80%. There's always going to be 20% that's bad, and we can't catch everything. It's like you were talking about. It's like you have to think about you're the bear, and you have to choose which salmon you're going to go after. That's swimming upstream, and you're not going to be able to go after it all, or else you'll die. You'll die of frustration and explode. But you have to kind of get it there, and you have to sort of live with that. I wish we could be like Apple and just control everything. But that's not a reality, and we'll never get there. And so the sooner you accept like your reality of that matrix, then we sort of say, let's do it. And I feel like we've come a long way. Just having these building blocks set out, has changed everything. People take it for granted now. They don't even remember when we didn't have our typeface. They're like, hasn't it always been this way? I'm like, yes, it has always been this way.
Yeah.
Can you talk about those white room sessions? Those sound amazing.
Yeah.
You got, you're looking at a whole host of work in different formats, media, platforms, different geographies. How do you even structure, a confab like that?
I love this question because I love the 360s. I really think I've just never seen another company do it. And I like how nervous it makes people. And, but what happens is there's an agenda set each quarter now. We'll set an agenda. I usually set the agenda, but it's all things we're working on. It could be a launch coming up. It could be events. It could be a celebration of something just shipped. It does not matter the status of a project. It could be in its ideation phase or its implementation phase. Doesn't matter. But the things I'm looking for, or there's a real good variety to the agenda. So we could be jumping to like a workplace project, to a content franchise, to a new brand we're launching. So real mixture of variety, all those disciplines represented. That's one. And it'll be like 6, 7, 8 topics. And then if a partner is involved, this is where it gets really fun. If a partner is involved, we invite them to come. Now, this is where cooperation versus competition kicks in, which is a deep-seated belief at IBM. You're going to hear live criticism and feedback about your work publicly outside of the context of your little isolated Zoom about the project thing. Live. And then you're going to see work that's been developed on that project you didn't win or went to a different agency. So it's just radical collaboration. And most agencies love it, actually, because they're getting a wider view of the whole company and the way the brain works at the company than they could ever get on their weekly status meetings. And other agencies, it's uncomfortable. But it largely is it's giving back to all of our internal stakeholders too, who have no exposure to these kinds of processes.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of testing, it's a good test because you kind of commission different things or you do different things and you think it's all going to work together until you put it in the room and you see it side by side and then you're like, this doesn't work. Yeah. And so that's the benefit of.
Or something's really working and it's just like, that social idea over here could be what we do over here. But it's also a very honest way of looking at the work. You can kind of start anywhere, end anywhere, and it's just the truth in a room. Yes?
Kind of a tougher question. So good design is good business, and things are really aspirational leadership directions. I'm wondering, the top C-level of IBM, do they live up to that? Do they live this culture? Or is there kind of different layers where it still lives, but on the executive level, they think engineering is good business, but not design?
Right. Great question. I think it's a mixture of both. I think our leadership is great at IBM, and I think we can get to them. That's the other thing people don't realize. As big as we are, everyone's pretty accessible, and we can get to we represent the work. There's a lot of trust and faith in the building. I think there are executives that are the beneficiaries of us being concentrated on design, and then there are the champions of design. I think there's a mixture.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, when you're at the C-suite level, they speak a different language, but they're talking about the same thing, which is like integration, working together, cross-selling, things like that. That is all areas where design can make a big difference. That's what we're focused on right now. Just like coming across, we have a lot of different things that we sell. I think we have like thousands of products, right? In lots of different areas. We don't just want to sell a client one thing. We want to sell multiple things, right? And so that's why having a common design language for product is so critically important, because a client's going to use a security product, an automation product, an AI thing, and they all have to feel like they work together, right? And so that's why, so that's how we sort of think about design. And you hear those things come up over and over again at the C level, but they may not say it as design explicitly.
Saying building bonds, challenges. If you have such a huge company that is rather working in silos, they go a lot of rotations. Doesn't it feel that sometimes for the designers quite exhausting to always re-educate stakeholders again and again on design and what you're doing? Or is it actually that you feel like you have 80% stable stakeholder managers and it's actually all established?
I mean, we have a lot of people. So when you have a lot of people together making decisions, there's always going to be like conflict or disagreements, or I mean, that's just the nature of the beast, I think. But I do think that part of the wonderful thing that we've been able to be, and it's not just us, it's the whole design community, product design, digital, art consulting, is that we reach out to each other all the time and try to help each other. Right, and so in that way, maybe some situations are going to be really frustrating, and other situations are not. But that's why we've established sort of this way of working, and that's why we've built these systems to make it easier, right? So that we're not inventing things that shouldn't be reinvented over and over again, the same things. You know, we can start at a higher level of conversation about design.
I was going to go ahead and claim 80% victory. Like, you know, as big as IBM is, sometimes it's quite small. Another good example of something we did that I should have mentioned earlier is the way we're able to populate Carbon in the IBM design language and develop a point of view is through something we call guilds. So you don't even have to be a designer to join the design community at IBM. You could be a data analyst, but have a hobby of like playing around with generative AI and join the generative AI guild, or the motion graphics guild, or the illustration guild. And these are organic groups. They meet every other Friday across the company. And a lot of what populates like our whole design language comes from them. There's one focused just on building plugins for Figma right now. That's all they're doing. It's super geeky. But sometimes it's like if you jump into that, you're like, oh my God. You know, there's another one around using AI to voice AI commentary right now, which is something we're playing around a lot with. And yeah, you get on this call and there's like 75 people on it. And they're not your colleagues. They're just from everywhere. They're not in the studio necessarily. Which is a really cool way of working, and everybody can kind of participate. I think that's true of IBMers. I think that somebody's always got a little side hustle, like another thing that they're also excellent at.
Yeah.
The musician, you name it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Why is it that you give away so many assets, and how does it benefit IBM to do that?
Well, we had a debate about this. I think I was on the side of, I don't want to give that away, the typeface, I think, originally. But when you think about, I think Mike Abbank was the one who talked me into it, because we want to be able to use it freely. I think like one of the big, I don't know how you all feel, but the big frustrations when we used to license it to the typeface is that, oh, then the agency partner had to license it. And then it just became really difficult. It became a barrier to get things done. And so we just wanted to get rid of all the barriers, basically. And so that's why we gave it away, and it's okay. Actually, we like it when other people use our typeface. So, because of the way it's designed, it looks a lot like us. I mean, I think so.
Yeah, I would add to that. There are a couple other reasons. One is scaling its use and ease of use. Simply, like, pretty soon you'll go buy a new MacBook Pro, and it will come with IBM Plex on it, just like it does Courier today. Which will mean I won't have to send your team, or Terry won't have to send your team the typeface to get our presentation to load. So some of it's just pure scalability, like across PCs as well. The other is, not so much Plex. That was a big decision point. But why our design language is public and available, downloadable, and so is Carbon. For me, honestly, one of the reasons is it's making a public promise to do better design. If you could only access these sites and be an employee of IBM or maybe a partner of IBM, what I like is it puts outward reverse pressure back in on us to deliver. Like, we've said what our expectations of ourselves are. We wrote it down. We have principles. And I want to hear about it when we're not hitting it. So publishing it and declaring it, to me, was a big reason to make it public, because it wasn't just a showy thing. It was more like, oh, well, if it's going to go on IBM design language, it better hit a certain bar. And that helped us internally drive that standard up.
I'm going to say I'm very sorry, team, but we are out of time.
Well, I'm going to take over just for a second and not let you go. May I have a photographer down here? I'm going to ask the audience, and before I do that, I do want to say that answer, Todd and Terry, IBM is a very, very bold, courageous company. It's all inclusive, and that takes courage. It's far more difficult to be collaborative than it is to dictate. And that's why you're around for more than 100 years, because it really does reach inside. And thank you. And I'm going to ask the audience, you're holding Grid, which is the official NYC by Design Festival Guide, and it's new. And I would ask you, please, pick it up, pretend you're reading it. I'd love to get a shot of this. So pick it up, hold it open so that we can see Grid. It's quite a sight.
Wow,
thank you
cool.
so much for doing this. This is going to be an
IBM.
important shot for us. So thank you for playing with us. Thank you for coming this evening. Thank you for being part of the festival. That's okay. We'll see Wendy's smiling face.
It's a little hard.
This is great, and thank you so very, very much. And we'll tell you when, and it looks wonderful. Thank you. We have other keynotes happening for the rest of this week at different venues. They're listed there in Grid. We also have a wonderful exhibit at Hudson Yards, and it's called Souvenir. We asked 52 New York designers to design their version of a well-designed New York City souvenir. So please do see it there. And we also have emerging designers working there as well. Okay. A what? What is a boomerang? Okay. What is a boomerang?
We're going to do a boomerang, so everybody hold your papers and shake them a little bit. Ready? 1, 2, boomerang, IBM! That's it.
That is great. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Todd and Terry.